The second context is when we've been ignoring it. If we ignore the 3-year-old or the inferior for long enough, it starts to demand attention, just like a toddler would, right? Like I've done a lot of drives with toddlers. Well, a toddler, my toddler.
Blood drives with
Right.
toddlers.
Not many toddlers, just my toddler.
You got toddlers in the back, just rolling around. Little daycare center in the back of the van.
Just the one.
Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And tonight we are joined with a great studio audience here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We have people, they came from all over. They flew in from Florida and the UK and Australia and all over the United States and Canada to be with us tonight to talk about personality types and personal growth, the intersection of these things here at Personality Hacker. We're happy everyone is with us live. So Antonia, Philadelphia, we've been doing our Personality Life Path program, some coaching this weekend. We decided while we're here in the city doing some high-level coaching with some clients and students to be able to do a live podcast. And we've asked some audience members if they have questions, things they'd like to talk about around personality types. Who has something they'd like to ask or discuss or talk about tonight? Anyone have something? Right here? Yes. Come on down. Give them a hand. Blowing out my levels. Okay. What's your name?
My name is Major.
Major. Where are you from, Major?
Herndon, Virginia.
Herndon. So you came up to Philadelphia for this.
I did, yes.
Fantastic. We're glad you're here.
Worth the drive.
Yeah. So tell us what's going on for you. What's a question or something you want to talk about tonight?
So the question that I have is for people who have done a lot of personal development work with their type already and even progressed on to, helping others do personal development work with their type as well. And when things start to get a little boring, they're not finding a lot of new information around typing. How do you keep the excitement up?
Wow. Okay. Is this something you personally struggle with?
Yes.
So you've been big into personality types
for 5 years.
5 years, and you've studied it all. You've gone deep into it, and you're finding yourself a little bored with it.
Yeah, I feel like I've reached the end and I need maybe something else. I've thought about doing the profiler training, but I don't currently have an opportunity to use it for work. So I don't know where I would use that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And what's the problem? Why not just be bored and stop doing it? Why you're bored with it, so why not just give it up? Why do you have compelled to keep going?
I enjoy it. I think it's valuable. I think it's a skill that I don't want to lose.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask your preferences?
My preferences, I don't mind.
Yeah.
Your best fit type.
Best fit type.
ENTJ.
ENTJ preferences. Okay.
What
do you say, Antonia? We've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
Have we kept the spark alive in personality types?
I think that's a really valid question, actually. And I would ask you, how have you used type already?
For instance, on the personality type ENTJ resources, and I forget what it's called on your site, where there's resources for each type or almost every type. I've read all of the books that were recommended. There's a list about 25 books. I've read all of them. I've watched all of the movies, explored all of the topics, read all the articles and the videos. And I've done some of that for other types and have, asked people their feedback on their personal growth journey. And so I've proven to myself that it works, that it's helpful, that it's a valid science, if you will, to apply to your life to help you make your life better and do what's best for your own design as a human being. And so it's kind of like I've already proven it to myself. What's next?
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is that you consumed a lot of information around, particularly having ENTJ preferences. How have things changed in your life around knowing this information?
Self-awareness has gone up. Embracing the introverted intuition, knowing how it's set up to work and using it properly, whereas before I kind of ignored it. I definitely found where my tertiary function of extroverted sensing has kind of reared its head more than it probably should to be healthy. And so slowing down, getting into that, the bigger, higher level view of life and playing a bigger game, as I've heard you say so many times, Antonia, has really helped me to make more strides in my career, as well as my personal life.
Yeah. And have you, what kind of dive into introverted feeling have you done?
So as an ENTJ, you would have
I'm familiar.
introverted feeling or authenticity. I'm saying this for people maybe listening or watching too, just so we orientate people. This would be your 3-year-old or inferior process. Not for you. I know you know this, Major, because you've been deep into type. I'm saying it for anyone else maybe listening for orientation.
My 3-year-old. I actually did the exercise that's recommended for the ENFP and ESFP, which is the core values. So I deep dove into some core values for myself. I found charity organizations that I could, play a part with, things of that nature. And I've gotten into a habit of asking myself how I feel or how I want to feel about a certain thing when tough issues come up.
Yeah, excellent. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I am 33.
33. Okay. So the reason why I think this is such an interesting and great question is, as a practitioner, as somebody who uses it all the time and has been creating content around the subject for well over a decade, and also has ENP preferences. There can be a moment where we're just like, am I done? I think I might be done. Right? I've done this a lot.
That was like yesterday, right?
Yeah. Well, and I've gone through these cycles. I mean, on some level, it's like, well, am I just consuming more content and thinking about it more because like my profession relies upon it, or is there still a love for the topic? And so our friend Dr. Dario Nardi, he has a phrase that when he said it, I thought there's a key right there to understanding the value of these concepts of this system in the long term. He said, we can't talk about type until we talk about development, which means from his perspective, and I personally would agree with it, that the system does fall flat. It does lose some of its carbonation if we're only seeing it as knowledge to consume. If it's only input, right? If it's just information. And there's a model that we talk about on the podcast sometimes. I don't know if you've heard me say it, but it's called DIKW. It stands for data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. And each level builds on the previous. So data is just like basically, I just think of it as like bits, right? Like ones and zeros. That's data. And then information builds on data. So it's like organized data is information. It's information that can now be like something can be understood. And then when it's applied, it becomes knowledge. So now it's not just information that you hold in your head, but now it's now this is how it works in the real world. This is how I apply that knowledge to my life. And then finally, wisdom is it's the result of applied knowledge. It's when you get to that point where you realize what rules can be broken effectively, right? It's like that old adage, like knowledge is knowing tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not throwing it in a fruit salad, right? So when can something be? Yes. When can the rules be broken, right? When is it no longer just theoretical? When is it like truly practical? And I think type falls under the category of information for a lot of people. And I think when it's information we're consuming, I do think it hits a lot of diminishing returns. I really do. I think it's like, okay, so I've studied this. What's next? When we start applying it, when you start turning it into knowledge, I think that's when the spark comes alive again. I think we get recarbonated, re-excited by the content, because now we start to see where it's the right tool for the job and when it isn't. We start to create discretion. We start to go, okay, so because we can over apply type. In fact, a lot of people over apply type. They turn everything into type. I brush my teeth this way because I'm an ENTP, right? It's a massive over application. But there are moments when type becomes really powerful, when you start catching yourself in behaviors and realizing that type is the best tool for the job to both diagnose what's going on for me there and then also prescribe a way out. So I would say that anytime I hand my power over to other people, it is almost always a case of me being too into my extroverted feeling, because I'm favoring connection. I'm favoring relationship over what is personally true to me, over what makes sense to me. And I've been doing this for a million years, it feels like. I've done work around making sure I stay in my introverted thinking and supporting with extroverted feeling. And yet I probably did that just last week. Right. And so to me, it feels like knowing my type preferences and applying them feels like the work of a lifetime. So does that mean I continue to consume absolutely every piece of information about type? I don't. Like there are a lot of people who have created some pretty complex systems out there around type, right? And it feels like it just expands and expands and expands. It gets more complicated. There are more aspects to it. There are more data points. And I can appreciate that. I can understand why it's so interesting that you want to just keep flaying it out and flaying it out. But to me, that there's just a moment where I'm like, well, I guess if I keep shoving more information in my head, I'm going to have to lose something else, right? Like if I keep learning about absolutely every square inch of every type system, I'm going to like lose my piano lessons from childhood or something. It's like, I just don't have enough room. But if I stay with the fundamentals, right? The fundamentals, and I keep seeing various styles of application, and I keep using it in like moments when Joel and I are in a fight and I want to wring his neck. And I'm like, why can we not figure this out? Why is it that this argument just keeps going? We've been having this battle for 5 years. Why can't we figure it out? And it almost always comes down to I'm speaking a different language than he is. He has a very specific way of experiencing this reality that is his, and I have a very specific way of experiencing my reality. Type has turned into shorthand to make it so that we can sync up, right? And even if we don't end up actually like in that moment reconciling, we're a little further along than we were the last time, right? We're a little further along in that conversation because we have tools to be able to like go, well, my introverted thinking doesn't care what your introverted feeling says because it doesn't make any sense. And he's like, well, I don't care what the data says. I just feel this way. Right. And then that conversation, it becomes something more than just no, you're wrong, I'm right. So the answer is, and I already said this earlier, I'm a little tired, so I'm going to say 1,000 words when 10 words would do. But the answer is application. It's how it maintains beauty to me. It's how it maintains interest. And then I'll tell you what I did. Okay. So buyer beware.
Okay.
This doesn't mean you. Don't write this down. All right. For me, it really reemerged. The spark really reemerged when I started to not just go back to basics, but source it all the way back to Jung. When I read psychological types, right? That we've built an entire system, and by we I mean Isabel Briggs Myers and Catherine Briggs, but an entire system was built out of one chapter of that book. It's chapter 10, and I think it's like 5 out of the titles. I think there's like I can't remember how many chapters there are, maybe 13 chapters or something, 12 or 13. I can't remember, but 5 of them has the word problem in it. The problem of type, the problem of this, the problem of this, the problem of this. And the reason why Jung kept saying like all of these things were problems is if we don't do hygiene on our mind, if we don't do psychological hygiene on a regular basis, it manifests as all sorts of problems. And he says if we don't handle them within ourselves as an individual, they play out in the political sphere. And so basically, if we don't get our shit handled, we bring it out to the rest of the world and we project it, and then we just constantly fight as a society. And then it ends up becoming all the political problems that we see. So going all the way back to Jung, going all the way back to the original intent, which is psychoanalysis, going all the way back to almost like a psycho-spiritual hygiene. That is endlessly fascinating to me, endlessly fascinating. And understanding his work around archetypes and understanding his work around how to avoid one-sidedness, how to avoid becoming the kind of person that disavows parts of our identity because we don't want to see them, right? Won't acknowledge and won't own our shit, won't acknowledge and own our stuff, right? We'll turn a blind eye to it.
Yeah.
That's a schismed person.
Yeah.
And it's type. And of course, as I learn all this stuff, now I see how type and these systems all weave into it, and how they actually create this really sort of magical algorithm of how to avoid all of that stuff. Now the landscape is not, it's not theoretical. It's not ones and zeros. It's not just math. It's not just, like, well, what does it mean to have extroverted sensing as an eighth function or whatever? Like, it's not just the theory of it or the information of it. Now it's like alive and rich, and it's keeping me from becoming a cardboard cutout version of myself when I become older, right? It's helping me enrich myself and become a whole person. And I recently read a quote, and I wish I remember her name. She's a person who marries Sufism with Jungian analysis. And she said that when a person, and I read this to people in our personality life path program yesterday, when a person accepts all of themselves and is willing to do what Jung would call shadow work, there's a stillness about them. It's like their essential, like their nervous system is still, their body and their soma is still. And the reason why is they don't have to be nervous that somebody's going to reflect back to them something they don't want to see about themselves, because they accept all of it. They accept all of it. So there's no anticipation. There's no like nervousness. There's no fearing being triggered. There's none of that. They're just still. And she said that other people become still in their presence, because you can tell when somebody won't reject anything inside of themselves, so they won't reject anything inside of you either. And so there's no need to be on edge. And so that stillness is contagious. That centered nervous system, that still soma, it's contagious. And now those people, their shit doesn't play out in the political sphere. So for me personally, the way that this always is fascinating to me, it's always interesting to me, is because it does that, right? It ends up in that realm. And that's always the work of a lifetime. That never ends. In fact, I'm going to die before I get to discover the most me. Right? I'm going to die before I discover all of me. So that always stays interesting. Does that make sense?
That's a profound and helpful answer. I'm glad I asked the question. I'm glad you answered. Yeah.
So I would say, at the risk of trying to market or sell to you, I would just say that profiler training would be a fantastic starting point for anybody. I mean, if you're, or something like that, you're getting a practical methodology to apply it in almost a gamification way, and how to identify other people's personality types. I've seen a lot of people, that's the next level for them, is on the journey to what she just talked about. It's being able to do it in a more professional or more serious manner, and be able to understand and profile people, not just from a distance typing them, but be able to have a conversation and be able to really dig in what's going on for them. Because it sets the groundwork for you to be changed and them to be changed after that profiling experience, right? As you talk about their personality type.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you don't have to join profiler training. We'd love for you to be part of it, but yeah, something like that, where you put a discipline or a method to it. I think that probably, it sounds like that's the next step for you. Some practical application of this in a more formal way is the principle-based, like, next lily pad. And then what she's talking about is available right after that, I think, on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So do you feel complete on the
I do. I feel
conversation?
complete, and I agree with you. I think profiler training is something that I will do.
Cool. Well, we would welcome you if you decide to join. That's great. Give him a hand, everyone. Thank you so much. Who's next? Yeah, go ahead and have a seat. Yeah. Who's next? Now that we, come on up. Now that we had the real light start to the episode, let's get a little deeper. All right. So we got two people coming up here. Fantastic. What are your names?
My name is Kate.
I'm Jared.
Kate and Jared, welcome. And where are you all from?
Thank you. From Philadelphia.
Right here from Philadelphia. What are your best fit type preferences?
I'm an INTJ.
INTJ?
And I am an INFP.
INTJ and INFP. Are you together as a couple, or are you just friends?
Together as a couple.
Okay, fantastic. So what do you got for us? What's a question, comment, thought?
So the question is, I'm wondering how we can tell the difference between like neuroses or tension points or anything like that could be coming as a result of our Myers-Briggs cognitive functions versus our Enneagram.
Okay, so a lot of people are interested in both systems.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is, let me just see if I can take a stab at this. A lot of people that are like Enneagram 4s and maybe INFPs are like, am I a 4? Am I an INFP? Is this a Enneagram 4 issue where I'm in my emotions and I'm doing all this? Or is it an introverted feeling issue? And so you're asking because it's like those kinds of Like maybe give me more specifics. Why would you
Yeah.
ask this? What's the point of it?
Yeah, I guess I wonder if one were to assume something, like for instance, for me, I'm very interested in your guys' perception around the loops and the going back and forth between our dominant and tertiary functions.
Yeah.
Say I were to assume that's what was going on, but it was actually a 5 thing. Like, could I somehow hold myself back by assuming it's coming from one model when it's actually coming from another?
Gotcha. So
Yeah.
diagnostic question. Like, how do I know where to look at this? Which lens do I look at it through?
Yeah.
Okay.
So our friend Dr. Beatrice Chestnut, she teaches the Enneagram. She wrote a book called The Complete Enneagram, and then recently with her her business partner, Aranio Paez, the Enneagram Guide to Waking Up, I think. And Beatrice and I used to do this thing that we called mashups, where somebody would call in, they'd say, this is my Enneagram type, and then this is my Myers-Briggs type, and here's my problem. And she would take it from the angle of the Enneagram, and she'd talk all about like what the work they need to do with the Enneagram. And then I would take it from the Myers-Briggs side, and I talk about all the work they need to do with Myers-Briggs.
And I was just the pretty face.
And Joel was the pretty face, as usual. Okay. Not your fault. You're handsome. So it was astonishing how often the work was the same. It was amazing. It was almost always like I'd go, yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what I'd say about their Myers-Briggs type. And then I would say something about Myers-Briggs type, and she'd go, yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say about their Enneagram type. So what I got from that is there's a fair amount of crossover. Now, what's crazy about that is that wasn't just when it was a common type or a pairing, right? It's like Joel was just talking about somebody with IFP preferences in Enneagram 4. That seems very common. Or maybe somebody with INTJ preferences in Enneagram 5 or whatever. Like those are the common crossovers. But it was even when they had like a very unusual combination, it always still felt like the same work. And I think it's because it's the same work. It's the same work, right? It's all roads lead to Rome. These are just tools that help us get to where we need to be on the growth work that we're trying to do. And if let's pretend one would think that something's coming up for them because they have INFP preferences. Maybe they have a loop situation going on between their driver and 10-year-old or dominant tertiary, but it was actually an Enneagram 5 issue. I think if you do the work anyway, it's not going to matter. I think it's going to hit both systems. And that's why the systems are, they're both incredibly powerful. And also you can be agnostic about them, right? You can be somebody who goes, I love Myers-Briggs, but I hate the Enneagram. And you're going to be fine. Or I love the Enneagram, but I hate Myers-Briggs. You're going to be fine. Because they're both just access points, right? They're just opportunities to get introspective and figure things out about yourself and put language to things and articulate things that otherwise would be a mystery. So I could be wrong. I might be wrong. But I actually think it doesn't matter. Yeah.
What matters to you, though, because you asked the question. So give us more.
I wonder. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, coming from the angle that I think that the cognitive functions are a foundation. The form in Enneagram I see as more the content. So if you have the Enneagram neurosis flowing through the cognitive functions, you're necessarily going to see them together. I mean, whatever angle you look at a person, INTJ, 6, manifesting generator, Sagittarius, it's always going to be, I guess, just one point of looking at the whole thing. I guess fractal would be the best way of saying it.
Yeah,
I think what maybe we also have a question about profiling. For instance, when we were in the digital meeting last week and Savato was an ENTJ, as soon as she was on, I was thinking, this is a 2. And it was very hard for me to dislodge from my head. All right, I know that just because she's saying FE flavor things, it doesn't mean that she's an FE person. I was like, I should be very cautious about this because I'm sure there's 2s who have types that are, not what you would expect. So yeah, I'm a therapist and I've certainly seen how these always run together. But then there's those moments where, I don't know, I guess maybe it's hard to really pinpoint why it is that specifically it feels necessary. I guess it kind of comes down to polarities and what polarity to look at, since there is a distinction there, although I'm going to get verbose if I keep running on.
Yeah.
So
can I provide some
Yeah,
context?
sure.
So both of you are in our profiler training course.
Mhm.
That's right. That's why I'm like, I recognize her. Why do I recognize her? Because I just saw you last week. That's why. Sorry. And like Joel said, I've been doing a lot of coaching right now, so I'm a little tired. So you're talking about a profiling session that you watched one of our practitioners do, where the person ended up having ENTJ preferences. And they almost looked like they were a feeler for a while, right? In the profiling session. And then come to find out at the end of it, it's like, oh, they were ENTJ preferences. That's interesting. And so this is also a profiling question, which is how can you identify somebody's best fit type if they have an unusual, say, Enneagram pairing, right? Effectively? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. And the answer is it's really important. And this is one of the reasons why in profiler training, we try to say this a lot. It's really important to expand our frame on our templates of each type, because it's actually not just the Enneagram type that's going to alter how a person shows up with their type, their best fit type. Their life circumstances, their culture, their age, their development. Like there are a million different things that come in here. A person who is a very common pairing of Myers-Briggs and Enneagram might have been raised internationally, right? And maybe all over the place, and that's going to alter. Like I'm going to harken back to Dario. Dario has INTJ preferences, and he's also a 5. But he looks very different than most INTJs. In fact, there's a lot of people who don't believe he's an INTJ. But one of the reasons why is because he was raised all over the planet, right? They moved constantly. And that altered how he showed up. It made him more chameleon-like. It made it so that he didn't just have to blend in with different communities. He had to blend in with radically different cultures his whole life. And so he's got kind of a bit of a, almost like a perceiver flexibility. Because he had to, right? Just as a survival mechanism. So I think that's why it's important to get a little bit of, like in a profiling session, get a little context about the person's life, kind of find out the circumstances. Their age is really important, right?
Timelines.
Like where they're at in their development. If they're young, it's going to look totally different than when they're older. And so all that stuff is really important, and it will throw you off. And that's why in profiler training, we say, don't worry about accuracy for like the first 20 sessions. Because you're just trying to get a concept of the flavor of this person, right? Like what all the different ways a person can show up. We have almost 8 billion people, and we have 16 personality types. So the array of type is, it's almost overwhelming how many different flavors we come in. And when we first start out, we end up being the expert on type, right? All of us, because we're the only person, for most people, not everybody, but for most of us, we're the only person we know that's into type. Most of us, right? And so we automatically become the expert. And there are people who are at the center of a bell curve of type. They're like kind of like sort of the prototypical version. And those get really obvious to us. And we get really good at identifying those people. And then we go, no, I think I'm actually pretty good at this. It's always the edges of the bell curve that are a challenge. And that's why that's why we created profiler training, is not for the people at the center. Those people are easy. It's always for the edge cases, right? The people on the sides of the bell curve. And those people, they come in so many different variations. And so Enneagram is one component, but there's a lot of other ones too. So it's a matter of like getting enough context, understanding all those things flavor us, and trying to get as much information about the person's story as possible, so that you can kind of go, oh, that might be why this is an unusual ENTJ. Does that track?
Yeah.
Okay. Does that help, by the way?
Yeah.
It does, for sure. I recognize how important context is. I guess there's a more abstract question of what actually does a cognitive function describe versus what does the Enneagram or something else describe. Kate, I don't know if you wanted to ask or clarify anything.
No, I felt like that was helpful and thorough.
Yeah. So this is just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Personal opinion, right? Darn it. So I think of cognitive functions as almost like it's like our operating system, right? Or maybe even further down, maybe even our firmware. And I think of Enneagram as more like software. Even though I do think that I do think we might be born with our Enneagram type. I suspect that Beatrice made an argument for it, and I kind of bought it. Which gives it a little bit of a deterministic feel. But those are like how we're using our functions is manifest through Enneagram oftentimes, right? Our passions and our vices and our virtues and all of that stuff. That feels to be more like the apps we downloaded than it is the underscoring of the operating system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Give them a hand.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Okay, who's next? Hello. All right. So what is your name, sir?
My name's Mike.
Mike, where are you from, Mike?
I'm from Paso Robles, California.
California.
Yes.
All right. You're welcome here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
We'll let
First
you
time
California.
here. Yeah.
Really? You've never been to Pennsylvania before?
I've been everywhere but the Northeast
Oh,
of
wow.
the United States. So yeah.
Well, welcome.
First time here. So show me the love, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brotherly love
All right.
here in Philly. So what are your best fit type preferences?
ENTP.
Okay. What do you want to talk about? What's the question? Let's go into it.
Well, so as an ENTP, I'm curious about a lot of things. And so I've been a substitute teacher. I've been an educator for a while, but I've been substitute teaching for the last 6 years, and mostly junior high and high school students. And, using the Myers-Briggs understanding introvert, extrovert was very helpful. Because I could come into the class and I could see the energy, and I would actually let the kids know I can see extroverts and introverts, because usually the introverts are very kind and considerate. And you'll have this certain we know who causes the problem.
Extroverts.
Yeah. And then I had to admit to him, I go, yeah, I was really a bad kid in junior high. Yeah, I went, but in high school I changed. But so it helped calm the class down, and kids could start knowing, because everybody knew who did what, right? And as a substitute, I really have no power over their grades or anything. So they share a lot more to me. Okay. So I really, and the teachers do. So everybody confides in me, And so I was looking, and then I started seeing what was happening with the dynamics of the education. And so this is in public schools, right? And my son's an ISTJ, and he's the most responsible human being on earth, because my wife and I knew that. So as parents, we understood things, and we're both educators, so we know what's going on. But I've been thinking, I go, we do a lot of this learning as adults, where we have a lot of suffering from things. And so I'm looking at this, I look at the students and I go, they have 6 bosses a day for 180 days. So they spend 180 hours with 6 different teachers. And I see the whole spectrum of the Myers-Briggs. I see it all the cognitive functions. And so when you were starting to talk about, when you talk about the cognitive functions of processing information and how they make the decisions, well, this is going every day. They have to do that. And do the teachers know this? And what if they did? What if I would have known that when I was in high school or in college, looking for my major, all that? And I know it's about age 14 is when they can understand it. And a lot of kids are looking this stuff up, and they're talking to me. And it's great when INFJs come and talk to you about this, and you're like, you know about the Enneagram? You know about they know this stuff because they're looking it up. And so I was going, well, what would be the benefits or the pros and cons if we could start, having maybe teacher training of looking at this when we're looking at the kids, in high school, starting college, what is the pros and cons of doing that? And, I'm really excited. And I'd like to find an application for it.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm looking for, to get some guidance of, where could you really go bad, make it worse? Or how could you use it and really change things for everybody?
Yeah, I think it's powerful for young people to tune into. I mean, we talked to my children about it. And I think my oldest son, ENTP preferences, Gunnar, 17 right now at the time of this recording, he definitely was taken to it. My other 2 kids haven't yet totally, but it's been really powerful for him to understand his relationship with his mom, with me, with his life, his friends and all of that. So I think kids can get this, like you said, they already know it. And I think it's all over the internet. It's all over social media, and it's spreading to other countries now for young people too. I think it's huge in Korea and on TikTok. It's like, there's a lot of places where type is becoming ubiquitous.
Right. And I think I'm really asking is this really for the adults who are working with the kids?
Yeah.
Because isn't this the key to unlocking who they really are?
Mm.
And how can, it's just like they're the ones missing it.
Yeah.
And as the teachers and the educators.
Well, let me ask you this. This is the big question. The idea is great, but I don't have a lot of faith in the education system picking up something new and engaging that works well. Like, that's my thing is like, we could say it's a great idea, but are we really going to see this in a system?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's the question. You have more
How
experience
did it-
inside the system.
Yeah. I having been in this system, thinking about that and realizing it's like, I did a little math. I remember it's like, do math. That's the fact. It's like, they spend 185 days in school. How many do they spend out of school? And maybe that's where we can get the kids that it's relevant to their life. So it might be educating them with that outside of school.
Type camp, a summer camp for personality types.
Jonathan, where's he at? We got to talk to him.
Yeah.
I mean, really, and that type of thing. And then they're free to explore without having any grades or whatever. So maybe that's the place to take it is we need to do something type camp or something like that. But I think the question would be, well, could you see the pros and cons of what age groups and what could be the possibilities or what could be maybe they take over the world, all the young kids, if they knew this. And
I think right now, teenagers, and we can see it, I think everybody's having a challenge with identity, but especially young people.
Yeah.
Identity is such a massive issue right now. And it's almost like that young people will grab onto anything that will give them a sense of identity. We don't find identity in community anymore like we used to. We don't find identity in institutions as much as we used to. We don't find identity in family as much as we used to. So those were like the big ones that gave a sense of grounding to young people. And a lot of those are people have lost faith, or they're being marginalized, or there's like a lot of things that we used to rely on that were a bulwark for younger people as they were growing up, that we just they're just not there anymore, or that not like they used to be. So identity has become I almost think of it as like flags on Twitter or X, like the little flags next to your handle. This is kind of where identity has gotten to. And I think type is taking off so much right now because it's kind of like that. It's almost like a little flag. If I put ENTP in my hand, in my bio, then that tells you who I am, right? So the pro is that I think it's a healthier step towards identity than some of the other things that people are grabbing onto to define them, right? Because a lot of the things that people are using to define them as identities are actually not identities at all. They're preferences or their interests or their likes or their, time periods in a life, right? I wouldn't call them an identity. And so what's nice about type is that it actually does inform your cognitive wiring. It talks about how you're pre-wired. Now, the con is that that's also not an identity, right?
Yeah,
that's like our personality type.
That's how you think.
Yeah.
That's what it really is. It's
exactly. It's like a
how you
foundation.
Operate. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's also not an identity, but it's much closer to the center point. It's closer to the thing, right? So I think the pro is that teenagers, young people, even older people, we're struggling with identity, and this is not a bad skeleton for it, right? It's not a bad one to play around with as a major part of who you are. I mean, I wouldn't say that ENTP preferences is my identity, but it certainly is a part of it, right? And it certainly carried me through a lot of stuff. So that's the pro. The con is when we overvalue it, or when it's communicated in a way that doesn't implicitly state or explicitly state that it's a model of growth. So how many times have you heard somebody say, I can't do that, I'm a perceiver, right? I mean, we tease about it all the time. Jules earlier is like, I can't give you good information, I'm a feeler. But that's like intentionally the joke, okay? That's the joke. The joke is clearly that's ridiculous. So when a person overvalues it and grabs onto it, and now it becomes a series of limitations as opposed to an explanation of behavior, right? Or starting behavior, that's when it actually gets dangerous. right? I can't do that because I'm a blah, dot, dot, dot.
Right.
So the way it's communicated, I think, is super important,
Oh yeah.
right? It can't be like this is a get out of jail free card for anything you're not naturally wired to do. It can't be okay, this is you figured it all. You figured who you are out in and of itself, and you
Right.
have nothing further to learn. And especially that your type doesn't change, but your relationship to your type changes dramatically throughout your life, or at least it should.
Yeah.
Right. It should.
So that
So
that gets me thinking. I think it's how the application of it, and I think it's the type of things that when I learn, it says, hey, your hero energy is here. These are your 2 superpowers. Do you even know you have those?
yeah.
It's like, those are your strengths.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just almost getting to that to find. So when I heard that part during the cognitive functions, go, wait, this is what this introverted thinking. Do I do that?
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, these are my power things. These are like the gifts I've been given.
Yeah.
That I need to hone the skills, and I do have more. So it's like so it sounds like if you pinpoint it the right way, rather than it just being another label,
Yeah, exactly.
and then judging things off of that, like they're all that way.
Yeah. I almost feel it's more important for the parent to know than the child, right?
Well, I beg to differ with that.
So
Because it would be nice if
well,
Mike
if-
doesn't have a lot of faith in parents, I guess.
it's parents just give kids the phone. That's what happens now.
Yeah.
I mean, if that it's
That's the reality.
It's
That's
the
the
reality.
truth of what's
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
It is, and
Right.
it's just like, it'd be nice if the parents said, "Okay, we're gonna coach you how to coach your kid, and you guys need to both learn these things about each other."
Yeah, for sure.
Then it would be a team effort of
Yes.
learning how you guys can work together as a
Yeah.
team, learning. So
For sure.
yeah, but pretty much I tell kids, find somebody who can coach you if your parents aren't, and maybe you have to coach yourself. And a lot of them are doing that. They're trying to find out, what can I get? So I was just wondering how they could use this. So
My suggestion would be gamification of this.
Mhm.
I think that's really what's going to bring it
fun.
to
Yeah.
young people that are more casual with it. Going
it
into
fun.
heavy Jungian cognitive function coaching, it's like,
I know.
you're
I'm
like,
come
how
on.
you get a 17-year-old to do that maybe? But I think that if you
No,
have
I think you're
role
absolutely
playing,
right. Oh, that's what we learn with
games.
play. It's
Yeah,
fun. It's
yeah.
not another lesson we've learning.
yeah,
But so make it a play and apply it to gaming and that.
I think that would be really powerful. Maybe like a D&D kind of role playing situation,
Yeah.
or somewhere people can test, and it's more playful and it's more just the grammar and the structure of it all right now while they're young.
Yeah.
And because in some ways, it might be a little bit premature to be working deeply in some of these areas of your life, because
Right.
I outsmarted myself when I was a kid, right? I grew up in a summer camp environment with my parents running it, and I saw all these teenagers make all these dumb mistakes. And I remember at like the age of 11, I'm not going to be a dumb teenager and make mistakes. And then I cut myself off. I outsmarted myself, and I didn't have all this experience I could have had had I not done that. Right? I missed out on a bunch of things in my teenage years because of that.
You're too
I made
mature.
some not great decisions
Oh.
as an adult
Oh,
because
yeah.
I missed the lessons.
That's
as
what
a
this is
teenager.
worse, right?
Oh yeah. And so I wasn't really ready for the awareness of how stupid teenagers were. It actually
Right.
put me I needed to be a dumb teenager. I needed to make these mistakes.
Right.
And because I didn't, I think that was a detriment to me. So
So it's like play with it.
yeah, playful.
Yeah. So I seriously like summer camp for D&D cognitive. Yeah. That would be a lot of fun.
You should,
Yeah.
you seem like this is what
Yeah.
you're, what
I gotta
maybe
find some people to do it. Like have a full moon. Can you see a full moon out in nature summer camp?
yeah.
That would be scary and fun.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I think that's probably looking for an application that would get kids and make it fun.
That's cool.
Yeah. Because they're not going to sit and listen to a podcast
Hey,
I'll
are you
just-
saying our podcast is boring? Mike? What are you trying
I'll
to
just
say,
this.
Mike?
This is the
What are you
best
really trying to
part.
say
The
here?
best part is when like Jonathan would ask, you go, now how do people listen to this? And I go, I actually go to sleep listening to Antonia. He goes, you mean you let her get into your mind while you're sleeping? And I go, well, yeah, these guys are good. Why wouldn't I? So, yeah. All right.
You said we put you to sleep, and
Yeah.
podcasts are boring. I heard it all, Mike. I heard it all.
It's subliminal. That's what it is, right? It's going in. I wake up to
Yeah.
it. too.
Thank you so
All
much.
right,
Give him a
thank you.
hand. I appreciate it. Who's next? All right, we have another person. Come on down here. All right. What is your name, sir?
My name is Ken.
Ken. Where are you from, Ken?
In DC area.
Washington, D.C. area?
Correct.
Very good. And what's your best fit type preference? Do you know?
So that's a part of the question.
Okay.
So
Well, let's jump into it. What do you got for us tonight?
So my question is, can your profession stifle the expression of your personality type? I asked that question because my first real job I did for about a decade. I was a professional tennis coach, and I felt like I was just like being able to lead and being able to get my ideas heard and implemented quickly and got receptivity from the things that I was putting in. And then I transitioned into government, and I just felt like completely stifled. Like I wasn't able to express myself. And that is when I did my first assessment. So one of my friends is he's really skilled at these things. And when I first took the test, it came back as ENFP. And after last year, I left that job in September and started a new career path in financial planning, which I'm so stoked about. So at that time, I retook my DISC assessment, and I retook my Enneagram, and then I retook my Myers-Briggs on your website, which I love. It's only 60 questions, not 100, thank God. And it came back as ESTJ.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, those are two definitely very different systems. So I was wondering, could that have been suppressed because of the job that I was working in?
Yeah.
How old are you?
I am 29 this year.
29.
Yeah.
Professional tennis coach. That's cool.
Joel's a little jelly. So, absolutely, our career impacts how our type shows up. There's in fact, in our friend Dario Nardi's work on subtypes, he says that before 25, when it comes to the subtype of each of the Myers-Briggs types, before the age of 25, the most important factor is gender, right? And how people have been treating us up until that age. But after 25, the number one thing that influences your type is your job, is your career. And that makes sense because you're spending 40 hours a week there, right? You're spending all this time sort of shoving your cognition into very specific tasks, very specific mindsets, like you've got a job to do, and the stakes are high, right? There's weight to this because this is your career. I mean, this is how you're making your money, right? This is how you're making your living. So it absolutely impacts how our type shows up, and it will alter how we answer questions because we've been watching ourselves do things in a certain way. You know, like if you have a more athletically styled job or career, you're going to have more perceiver-like opportunities or behaviors that if you have perceiver preferences, that kind of job is going to be more conducive to it. It's going to have a little bit more flexibility. But if you go into, you said financial planning? Yeah. Now this is a different world, right? It's going to ask of you more judger-like qualities. And so you're going to watch yourself act like a perceiver in one context and maybe act like a judger in another context. Now, did your type change? Well, there's a lot of evidence to indicate that type doesn't change. We're probably born with our type preferences. It's not empirical. It's not absolute, but there's some information to indicate that's probably true. At least introvert and extrovert is. Now, we know that one because there's a lot of study done on introversion and extroversion, since that's a component in the Big Five. And psychologists don't mind studying the Big Five, right? That one's they're fine with studying that one. And so we do have some information to indicate that we were born with our introversion or extroversion preferences. And my suspicion is that if we did the same kind of study on the other dichotomies of sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, and on down, my guess is we'd probably find the same. So our type doesn't seem to change, but our relationship to our type changes dramatically. And when you look at it through the lens of cognitive functions, now what's interesting about ENFP preferences and ESTJ preferences is that they actually share all the same cognitive functions, right? They're just in a different order. And we have access to all 4 of our preferred functions, what Dr. John Beebe calls our egosyntonic functions, which basically means we identify with them. They feel like us. And so those 4 functions are the same. It's just what context or what is the context I'm in pulling out of me, right? What's it asking me to activate on a regular basis? And so if you were in a context where you were doing a lot of perceivery things, then that context was encouraging you to pull out the perceivery style functions. And if you're in a judger style function, the same goes that direction. So your career absolutely impacts it. So a better question isn't what do I find myself doing on a regular basis? I think a better question is, what am I doing when I'm not resourced? When I don't have the energy to pull on things inside of me that are harder to pull out because I'm tired or I'm exhausted or I just don't have the resource to pull on just, to any function. What's my set point? What do I default to? What is when I'm doing these things, I feel good. In fact, when I do these things, they resource me.
So you're saying like what re-energizes me?
Right. That's a much better question than what do I find myself doing on a regular basis?
Okay.
Right?
Well, I didn't think about it that way. Well, I do know, like, for example, when I was in the tennis world, transitioning into government and then financial plan, but and then in the tennis world, I was very forthright.
Mhm.
When we had our directors and like I was one of the head professionals, and someone would say something. There was one person who I didn't feel like was that qualified because they never played competitive tennis.
Mhm.
So whenever that person would say something, I would say that doesn't make any sense because it didn't. And I never shied away from that. I was never, using flowery language. I would just say, nope, I don't agree with that. When I did that in the government world, it was a different setup because I didn't have as much pull. There were agency heads and such. And the one time where I did get to use it was when, so I was in the correspondence position, and there was another agency that kind of did what we did. And they said, we do all the letters for the mayor. And I stood up and said, no, you don't. We do most of them. And people were like, oh my gosh. And I was like, I'm telling the truth. I don't care. And, but also I enjoyed it in the tennis world. I enjoyed seeing a system and then making it more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was coaching, I really focused on like figuring out the person in front of me. How can I best relay this information to them so that they get better at tennis?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my main goal. It wasn't the praise back. It was just making sure that when they left me, they were more competent at the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have this amazing opportunity now to do the same thing in the financial planning world. This person who may or may not be good with finances, how can I better their current position for the rest of their life?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, I don't know, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like candor was a value of yours in both contexts.
Correct.
Yeah. And it sounds like competence and capability has been important to you in both contexts. So I'd stick with what do I find myself consistently doing no matter what, right? No matter what the situation is, what is my go-to? Even if I hesitate or throttle because the context doesn't receive it as well, what's my instinct? Not how I change and have to morph in order to accommodate the situation. So what's my impulse? What's my instinct? So those are the kinds of questions, or those are the kinds of roads I'd be going down, more than just I showed up this way in this situation or this way. Because the thing about type, and this is why the psychological community does not like it, by the way, is because it's not behavioral. It's cognitive. And cognition is a much more difficult thing to pinpoint than behavior. Behavior is obvious, right? It's like, you did a thing. I just watched you do a thing. That's your behavior. But why did you do that thing? What was going on behind it? That's cognition. And it's much more difficult to suss out. And it's not as easy to study. So the challenge with type is that it's cognitive, it's not behavioral, which makes it much, much trickier, but it also makes it more powerful because we all do the same behaviors, right? We're all humaning and doing the same things over and over and over again. It's our why that's truly powerful, not just the what. So I'd study more the cognition and your why you're doing what you're doing more than just simply the behaviors.
Yeah. Does that feel good, Ken? At least for right now.
That's great.
All right. Hopefully we'll see you again. Give him a hand at some future. Who's next? Let's get a couple more in here. Yes, I see you. And I know you actually. What's your name?
Hello, I'm Joy.
Joy. And where are you from, Joy?
Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay. You were actually profiled by Antonia live on the stage at our last profiler training. And you're back for more, I guess.
Back. Yes.
Oh, man. All right. We didn't scare you off the first time.
Not yet.
All right. Remind us of your best fit type preferences.
ENTP.
ENTP.
Yes.
All right, Joy.
All right.
What do you got for us?
All right. I've got a premise and then I'll ask you my questions.
Oh, boy.
And I'm hoping I
Here
can
we
get
go.
through both. All right. So because I was recently typed by Antonia, I was
Profiled.
Thank you. Profiled by Antonia. I was given a copy of the ENTP owner's manual, which I was going through recently. And I was listening to the section on loops and grips and noticed that it seems that for things that are like a short to medium term grip, you're supposed to embrace your your inferior or 3-year-old function. And for a long-term grip, you're supposed to actually kind of shy away from it and get into your dominant or driver function. So I kind of have two questions with that, which are, is it possible to be in multiple grips at once? And if so, or if you're having difficulty kind of pinpointing which grip you might be in, how do you tell what the proper, like, how do you discern the method for actually getting out of that grip if the antidote for two of them, the types that you've listed there, are one thing and the ones for the other one are like the exact opposite?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to bring this down to a little more. I'm not going to be accurate when I say this. ENTP. I'm nervous. Okay. Being ENTP. But just for anyone that's watching or listening is like, grip, what's she talking about? So in the cognition of our personality type, if you imagine your mind is a 4-passenger car, you have a driver, co-pilot, 10-year-old, 3-year-old. What you're talking about is every one of us have a 3-year-old position of a cognitive function. It's different for each personality type, but we all have this like 3-year-old part of our mind, basically, that takes control of our personality or our reality for a period of time. It could be short-term, medium-term, or a long-term, kind of gripping us and not allowing us to be the full expression of who we are. It's kind of more of the more uncertain part of us trying to drive the car of our life. That's what you're speaking of when you say a grip. I just want to orientate people that are listening. They're like, I don't know what she's talking about. So that's what you're referencing. And your hypothesis or your question is, can that part of me, I think this is what you're asking, can that part of me grip different topics in my life? Is it the same part of you gripping different topics, or is it different parts of you getting into grip? That's the part I didn't get clarity around. Or did you understand?
Can I see if I've got it?
This Ansible ENTP thing here. Okay.
So what I hear you asking is can you have, since there's 3 different styles of them, can you be in more than one grip at a time?
Yes.
Okay. And
meaning length?
No, just like you're both in a short term and a habituated at the same time.
Okay, that's what I mean. The length of it, short term versus habituated. Right. Gotcha.
So let me also explain what a short term, a long term, and a habituated grip is, just very briefly. So a short term grip is it's one that comes on fast and furious, right? Like all of a sudden our 3-year-old or inferior function has grabbed the wheel of the car and it's just driving, right? And it's like it's usually explosive, or it's just this moment. It's intense. And 100% of us do it.
This happened to me right before the podcast started. No, I'm not kidding. Like my introvert sensing 3-year-old started freaking out because I'm setting up cameras, I'm getting really ready. I'm like, do I forget details? I told him, I can't think. I feel like I don't know what I'm missing. Like I was panicking just for like about 5 minutes. And I went for a walk. I got myself calm and I came out of it. But I was in a very short-term grip just a few minutes ago.
Right. It happens to all of us, right? And it's intense and it just lasts for a short amount of time until we can get ourselves out. A long-term grip is one that is now part of our lifestyle, right? We're actually obeying our 3-year-old or inferior function, and accommodating it in our environment. Like we create an environment to honor that part of ourselves. Not honor, excuse me. Honor is integration. That's a good thing. To obey it. All right. So that's a long-term grip. And a habituated grip has become part of our identity, where we describe ourselves now based on this grip. I had an ENFP, a friend with ENFP preferences, that said that she couldn't travel anywhere where she didn't have a shower door, right? Because she had just gotten too used to the comforts of life. And I'm like, you have ENFP preferences and you don't travel anywhere there isn't a shower door? And she's like, that's just who I am. I'm like, okay, that's identity level. Okay, so when you start like creating an identity around the limitations that your 3-year-old function pulls you in, that's a habituated, right? Okay, so there's the reason why the prescription is different for the first two versus the third, is because there's different reasons why we get into grips. The first reason we get into a grip is because our driver function, our dominant function, is exhausted. That's usually when we're in a short-term grip. And it's because we bring our dominant or driver function to everything, right? We assume it's the right tool for every job. We're a hammer and all the world's a nail. The challenge is that it's oftentimes not the right tool for the job, or at least it's not always, right? We can usually kind of find our way to like sort of jerry rig it in. And like, I talk about figuring out how to pop the top off of a soda bottle with, you don't have to have like a pop top. You can have like a knife. You can figure it out, right? So we can make our dominant function a versatile tool, but sometimes it's just not the right tool. It just isn't. But if we're so used to using it and it's just not working, we can tire ourselves out, get exhausted, and then our driver function just needs a break. And in that moment, our 3-year-old shows up and goes, I'll drive. Okay. And that's usually those short-term grips. The second context is when we've been ignoring it. If we ignore the 3-year-old or the inferior for long enough, it starts to demand attention, just like a toddler would, right? Like I've done a lot of drives with toddlers. Well, a toddler, my toddler.
Drives with toddlers?
Not many toddlers, just my toddler.
Toddlers in the back, rolling around. Whole daycare center in the back of the van.
Just the one. And she mostly occupied herself until she didn't, right? And so if we ignore our 3-year-old function or inferior function long enough, it will force us to pay attention to it. And it's usually extremely demanding, and it usually is throwing a temper tantrum. And so now we're all of a sudden in grip of it, right? So those are the two contexts. And the third context is when we've been trained into it. If we've been trained into it a lot, that's oftentimes when we're in a more long-term or habituated grip. It's like we think we have to. So because there are different reasons we're in a grip, there are different prescriptions to get out of it. If we're in a context where our driver function is exhausted and our 3-year-old shows up, we actually want to do that function, right? Because we want to continue giving the driver a rest, right? So it's actually a good thing. It's just we don't want to let it throw a temper tantrum. We want to give it authentic attention. Right? We want to go like, okay, so as opposed to flipping out, maybe I should just go take a walk, right? Maybe I should just have a moment of peace, right? And so you want to do more of it, right? But a healthier version. If we've been ignoring and neglecting it, we also want to give it some attention, right? Because the reason why it's shown up that way is because it's been ignored and neglected. So we want to give it attention. We just don't want it throwing a temper tantrum. We want to give it attention in a healthy way. But that third one, which is we've been trained into it, we have limitations or limiting beliefs around our driver or dominant. We have allowed it to take over almost like a tyrant child. In that situation, we don't want to do more of it, right? Because it's actually become unhealthy. I think about families. You would see them on those nanny shows like 10, 15 years ago. When a child controlled the family dynamic, it was always bad news. It was always bad news. Because they were insecure. They felt horrible, right? They didn't want to be in charge. Why is mom and dad like making it so that I'm not in charge? But a whole family could organize around a single strong-willed child. And it was just awful. So in that kind of situation, we're not talking about a child that is ignored or neglected and needs some attention. We're not talking about, a kid that just needs to run around a tree. We're talking about a child that has become tyrannical. And in that situation, you have to make sure that you don't give it any more power. And then the driver has to come up and actually take control. So that's why the prescriptions are different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Now to the second question, or the first, but in whatever order you asked it, the question of can you be in more than one at the same time? I think so. I think you can be in habituated grip and then also be in a short-term grip. And I think a habituated grip happens because you've been in a long-term one. Right. If you start organizing your life around this thing, eventually it becomes identity level. So I think the long term bleeds into the habituated, but once you're in habituated, I think you can definitely be in a short term as well. Yeah. So then what do you do in that situation? Yeah. Right. Well, in that kind of situation, you ride out the short term because it's a moment anyway. So you go ahead and ride that out. But then as soon as it's done and complete, you reevaluate your identity. You reevaluate your life choices. You start going, why am I allowing this part of me to take over and have outsized power? Right? Yeah. I need to get back into my strengths. I need to get back to my driver.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
That's the question.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joy.
Thanks,
Your right hand. All right, let's do one more. Come on down. All right. So what is your name?
I'm Holly.
Holly. Where are you from, Holly?
I'm from Dallas, Texas.
Do you know your best fit type preferences?
I do. It's ENFP.
ENFP, the best personality type of all time.
Yes.
I agree with you. So what do you got for us tonight? What's the question? Thought?
I've been studying type through the Myers-Briggs system and through John Beebe's archetypes for about the past 5 years and listening to your podcast and things like that. And so I have been told that I'm talking over people's heads and that I'm in the weeds. And so because of this, I wanted to ask you if somebody's been studying type for a long time, and how can they explain personality types and functions at a high level to make it more accessible for new people so that they can get a benefit from personality typing in the Myers-Briggs system? If they think it's all alphabet soup, they don't understand what the functions are, they're brand new, and it's confusing for them.
That's a good question. I think it's a common challenge too for people that have gone down the road. And I think the instinct is to say, all right, I think the best way for me to go, this is what people tell themselves, or this is how they think about it. I think they go, you know what, I need to teach this person the system so that they can understand every aspect of what I need to talk to them about. So they go and they over-teach, over-explain, try to give everything out. So maybe somebody just like not interested at all, right? But they really attempt to teach all this. So I think this happens all the time. Two fronts to that. One is there might be systems that the person already is tapped into or familiar with. That's one thing I've been noticing is like, I had friends of ours, we were hanging out at their house, there were a couple, and they had this like personality system they had learned at their church or something. It was about like flags, different colored flags. And as they were describing it, we were kind of patterning it ourselves to like different like either temperaments or different judging functions. And so instead of trying to teach them Myers-Briggs, we started to use the system they brought to us. Now that might be more advanced, you know, if you're translating something to a system somebody already has. But that's one thing that I've seen is it's hard to get people necessarily all the way on your terms, depending on the casualness of the engagement. So if it's something like that, I often try to tune into somebody's system they're already using and see if I can overlay what I know about personality types onto that system. And then the second way, and I'll let Antonia speak here in her depth way. But the other thing I often will say is personality type is really just showing us two things. It's how you learn information and how you make decisions. That's really all it is everybody's got a preferred way of how they see the world and learn. And everybody has a preferred way of how they make decisions and make judgment on the things that they learn. And that's really what your personality type speaks to in this system that we use, the Myers-Briggs system. And often that's a very simple, casual, introductory. And then if somebody's like, oh, really, tell me more, then I can go further with them. But most people, at least unless they're already into it, don't really want to know. Like that's enough for them. They're sated by that. They're like, oh, okay, cool. And they go on with their day. And so because I've had the experience of trying to explain, and then you've got a four passenger car, and there's these, tertiary and inferior. Well, we call it the 10-year-old and the 3-year-old. And they're like, I don't care that much, man. I just want to know I just want to ask you what you did for a living, right? Like I got to get off on this floor of the elevator. Like I got to get to my thing. So that's been my approach often the reason why I want her to speak is because I think sometimes I dumb it down too much and people could handle more. And I think I err on that side. I err on the side of simple, just give them a quick and dirty answer and be out. I think Antonia would err on the other side, right? Maybe a little bit more depth.
Well, I definitely err on the other side, but not for the better.
But there's a balance here, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that's what you're asking is why we did what we did with the car model and the nicknames.
Yeah.
Like and it actually kind of gave us a kind of a bad reputation in certain type communities because I don't like their nickname and I don't like their car model. But we did it specifically to make it accessible to people that had a harder time with some of the deeper concepts or the more complicated concepts. Like type is one of those things where it feels like you get bit by a bug, right? And you either got bit or you didn't. And you can see this when you're trying to explain it to people that you're like, no, it's super powerful. It's changed my life. In fact, it's like improving our relationship right now, even as we speak. And they're like, I don't understand how. What does it even mean? Yeah. So it's kind of a wand chooses the wizard situation. And so if the wand doesn't choose them, then it didn't. And so we tried to make it as accessible as possible, both for people just learning, just starting out, so they can make a transition from 16 personalities to Jungian cognitive functions. What's the bridge between those two things? I mean, I remember when I first started learning cognitive functions, it was so confusing. It was like, wait, what goes there? And so so extroverted thinking, is that extroverts that are thinkers? Like, how does that work? And I remember,
why do you write the E after the T? Like, what's that all about?
And this was when I was first learning, and like nobody was there to explain it to me, right? I was just like kind of trying to figure all this stuff out, and I was like, there's got to be an easier way to do this. So the car model and nicknames, that all became a way to make it accessible, particularly in the early days, because I mean, when we started talking about some of this stuff, there was not very much content available. So bringing things down to illustrations, to metaphors, analogies, this can sometimes bridge that. But at the end of the day, if a person's just not wrapping their head around it, I think they can still get the benefit of the system without knowing it. And I would say, now, the challenge with this, but as somebody who's been studying it for 5 years, you're probably up to this challenge. The challenge with it is that in order to communicate it to the other person without it just explaining all of the intricacies of the system, is that you have to have a fundamental understanding of it. You have to have a practical, real world, fundamental understanding. It's kind of like the better you know a subject, the more you can explain it to younger audiences.
More simply.
Yeah. Like explain it to me like I'm, 5th grade or whatever. It's like you have to have a fundamental nucleus understanding of these things in order to communicate it at that level. So it really puts the pressure on the person who knows the system. But if it's important enough, they don't have to understand it. Right. You can just kind of explain explain the things that are relevant as they're relevant. So I'll talk to Joel's mother, my mother-in-law, who is an absolute saint, and I won the mother-in-law lottery, which is awesome. She has INFJ preferences, but she's really not into systems. She's been married to an ISFP for now 50 years. We just did their 50th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, right? Yeah, the
I had
math
nothing
of
to
their
do
life.
with it, but they did well.
Pretty impressive. And surrounded by SPs. And so she's always kind of been like very extroverted sensing INFJ, right? Real active, real and she kind of gets it and she kind of understands it and is interested in it, but she knows that nobody in her world is really going to talk about it except for us. And so she tries to meet us halfway, but it's not really her thing, and that's okay, right? But every once in a while we get in a conversation, I'll start explaining how her functions work in contrast to his father's functions. But I don't use function language. I just talk about how, she's a little bit more on the heady conceptualization and would prefer to sit around and have conversations. Whereas, he's more of the get out there and go. And she's like, that just explains why every vacation I want to sit around by the pool and he drags me out to play tennis, right? and so she's like, that's really interesting. Thanks for that. So it's like leaving the cookie crumb trails of the practical application. It just means that you have to understand it at a deep or at a fundamental enough level. So it's not about depth and it's not about complication. It's not about understanding the system and, like in an expanded way. It's more about understanding the system in a more fundamental nucleus way. And I think if you can do that, if you can get to the nucleus and the heart of all of it, I think it becomes easier and easier to explain it to other people and have them get the benefit without having to force feed all the intricacies. Does that track?
It does.
Yeah.
And I'm here for Personality Life Path. And earlier today, the hotel manager asked me, oh, what is that meeting about? You guys look like you're such good friends and, you're all happy. And well, sometimes we're crying because we're dealing with our shadow. but Joel happened to walk by and I just looked at him and I said, hey, I need a quick elevator pitch about what we're doing here because I am so we're so deep in the shadow functions right now that it's just hard to get back to the shallow end. And so I just kind of said, hey, can you give me an elevator pitch? And I don't know, he said he made it up on the spot, which tracks as an ENFP. But I'm wondering, do you remember what you said? Because it was really pretty profound.
For Personality Life Path?
Yeah.
Oh, I just said there's 8 realities in life and we all have to engage with them. There's a reality of, as an example, the channel of like resource and money and time and management. There's the channel of, caretaking people and connection and relationships. Those are just 2 examples, but there's 8 in total. And all of us have to engage with all of them, but our personality type is wired to pay attention to 2 of those primarily. And really that's what indicates our personality type is what we're focused on or attuned to, those energies in the world. And even that feels too abstract to me, but that's what I told him at the counter. He said, oh, cool. He seemed to get it. My guess would be he probably has maybe ESTJ preferences because I talked to him for a little bit before that and afterward. And I don't know I didn't profile him or anything, but that would be my guess. And so I don't know what his gauge of interest was, but he seemed to take to that and understand what I meant by the PLP on that one. And that's one of the challenges in some of this, especially that Personality Life Path, explaining it to people when you're trying to promote a program. It's like
trying to figure out how to explain it to my kids. Like, why are you gone, Mom? And I'm like, and the last thing they saw was when we were doing extroverted intuition and we were playing Dungeons and Dragons. And why are you going to Philadelphia to play Dungeons and Dragons with your girlfriends and not staying here? And I was like, no. That was just one day. That's not what we're doing. And so, I'm looking for a better way to explain it because it's like, I understand it like in here. And for those of you listening, I'm kind of tapping on my heart, my solar plexus. I understand it there.
Yeah.
But as far as like a TE extroverted thinking way of explaining, like, why am I gone for a week? How do I explain what I'm doing? I mean, I know I'm going to come back a better person, but like, how do you explain it to people who just don't know?
Yeah. So what you're actually you're asking a fundamental marketing question.
I guess I am.
And
help us solve this in a pretty profound way.
When you figure it out, let us know.
You'll be hired.
It's been a
you have a job available.
Yeah, there will be one waiting. So when it comes to explaining like particularly personality life path is a desire to, it's like an encounter with your whole self. That's what it is. That's the purpose of that program, is to encounter your whole self, right? Like all of the aspects of it, whether you are aware of them, whether you're not aware of them, whether you have absolutely no idea that these things even existed. Like it's an audit of your whole self, right? That's the purpose of
audit.
it.
I forgot the word audit. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I forgot that one.
It's an audit of the whole self. And what is life but to become our whole self, right? Like what's our purpose? Like we do a lot of other things, but a big part, like from the time we're born to the time we die, the one thing that is the constant throughout all of it is us. So our passions and our purposes change over time, and our projects and our focuses change over time. But the one thing that doesn't change is that we're the constant.
Even the people change. The people you're born around are not the people you die around.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
They're a very different set of people.
The likelihood of that happening is almost infinitesimal. So it's like the one through line is us, and we carry ourselves to everything. And so that particular program is an audit of that person. That like we're our travel buddy through time, right? We are the one person. We were born with ourselves. We're going to die with ourselves, and that's it, right? So that person that you're traveling through life with, yourself, don't you want to know as much about them as humanly possible? Right? Don't you want to know how they operate? Don't you want to know how they're going to show up and why they're showing up the way they are? And don't you want to know all of the good and bad and ugly? And so that program particularly is designed to introduce you to the whole thing. Now, but that's different than type, right? And so, so it can feel self-indulgent, but I think that a self-audit and self-calibration might be the most powerful thing you can do as a mother, right?
I didn't really think it was self-indulgent at all. I mean, I have to say, I came here because I knew I was having problems, and I knew intuitively that you would know how to see that and reach into that based on the like on the construct of all of the 8 functions. And that's what happened here. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah. So I don't know if we answered your question fully, but
well, not really. But you know, you did say it was a marketing question, so I guess I'll just put on my marketing hat and come up with something for y'all.
You're part of Profiler Training.
Yes.
So we're going to see you at the next Profiler Training event or one of the next ones coming up soon.
If
hopefully.
I can figure out how to explain this one so that I can leave again.
But we'll see you at some point, and that's cool because we'll have another touch point. Keep talking about this too, which is great because I think this is an ongoing conversation because I'm actually on the same hunt as you are, like how to explain this more simply. I mean, that's the work of what Personality Hacker is doing a lot is we're trying to figure out how do we get access points to people? How do we make this come alive in somebody's life? How do we make it so that it's not just something theoretical, but it actually applies to a lived experience of a human? And that's it's not how type is often talked about online from my perspective. And I think that you ask a great question, so I really appreciate it. I think it's a really good thought exercise.
Yeah.
Well,
so thank you so much.
Just,
yeah, he was.
Well, no, I was just going to say, because, you know, my background is marketing.
Oh.
And so when I asked you for an elevator pitch, you know, I was speaking, you know, I'm not an MBA, but I'm speaking MBA language. And the guy we were talking to at the front desk is actually studying for his MBA, they found out. So for me to be able to say in a quick minute, you know, how I normally say something is like, I try to build the application in with the description. So we're learning about personality types, how we take in information, how we make decisions, how we prioritize things so that we can get along with each other better, understand each other better, understand ourselves better, so that we can meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
And that's how I normally describe it. I couldn't do that for PLP because I was just like, I just had this very deep experience and I don't even know if I can put 2 words together right now, but yeah.
I think that's a great description.
Yeah, that's great.
That's perfect.
That was really great.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you so much, Holly. Give her a hand. All right, folks. Thanks for being with us tonight here in Philadelphia. So if you've been listening along or watching along, you haven't had a third. We did have a third mic set up this time, and we had several people come up. But if you've not been here live with us, you haven't been able to come up to that third mic and say anything. So please come over to personalityhacker.com as after you watch this or listen to this episode. Let us know what you think. What's coming up for you? What questions do you have? What thoughts do you have? Comments. More importantly, share your. Do you know what I'm going to say? Share your story. That's right. Share your story because stories are compressed experiences. They help us really get to know what's going on with you. Right? Stories are powerful. They just really give us a glimpse into your life in a practical way. So if you come over to personalityhacker.com, please make your voice heard. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody who is here live. Thank you so much for coming out, thinking it's valuable enough to come out and visit us live.
Far away too. People flew in. For this.
It's lovely. It's very flattering, actually. So we really appreciate you doing that. And thank you for entrusting yourselves to us for an evening and asking really interesting, juicy questions and allowing us to answer them. So we just want to give a huge gratitude to everybody who's here. And thank you so much for spending your evening with us.
And we're all going to hang out after this. Yeah. So stay tuned. Hang with us. We're going to go hang out.
Yeah. So thank you. And if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android channels. If you leave us a rating and review on iTunes, it helps us out a lot. We have a video podcast that you might be watching and listening to right now. And if that's the case, you can like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications of future episodes. And we've been talking a lot about Personality Life Path because we have students in the audience right now that have gone through this experience. And the Personality Life Path program is, well, I guess I just said the thing, right? But I didn't say it very well because I think Holly actually said it better. But the program is designed to help you take an audit of your relationship to all 8 Jungian cognitive functions and to figure out how it relates to you, yourself, your whole self, right? And how to become the best version of that. How to make sure that there's not blind spots there, that you're maximizing your strengths. So if the Personality Life Path program sounds interesting to you, go to personalityhacker.com. And I don't know which is I shouldn't drop a link because it might change.
/life path.
/life path. All right.
I'm pretty sure that one will stay consistent. Personalityhacker.com /life path.
To go check it out.
All right. So thanks again to our live studio audience here in Philadelphia. Good crowd. Good crowd. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker Podcast.